Patience, Lawrence. We have all the time in the universe.
Four years ago, I made a video titled Why Ratchet Clank 2 Going Commando is my favorite video game. So you might be confused as to why I've titled this new video Why Ratchet Clank Future A Crack in Time is my favorite video game. Does this mean I hate Going Commando now? Yes. Just kidding, but does it mean that A Crack in Time is my new favorite now? Perhaps, but I more so mean that I have two favorite video games, and have for a while. I mean, I might favor one or the other depending on my mood, and at the moment I'm definitely more in the mood for A Crack in Time. Good thing too, as it's the game's 15th anniversary today, so I wanted to celebrate such a special occasion with a comprehensive review. I hope you have time for my longest review yet, in which I will explain why A Crack in Time is my favorite video game.
Eons ago, those wasteful Fongoids abandoned their city and took to the soil, leaving all technology behind.
Ratchet Clank Future A Crack in Time was developed by Insomniac Games and released exclusively for the PlayStation 3 on October 27th of 2009. Fun fact, I didn't know about regional releases, so I thought for sure the game would come out that date in Europe, and thus got my parents to search for it in stores every day until they found it, which was probably on November 6th, as that was the European release date. It was a grueling wait, but I was so happy when I finally got it, and I immediately fell in love with it. Another fun fact, A Crack in Time was initially supposed to be titled Clock Blockers, which is another banger of an innuendo, but it might have been a bit too on the nose to be accepted. And it's not a big loss since A Crack in Time is such an epic name. According to VG charts, the game sold over 1.8 million copies, which is no slouch, but you'd think it would have sold better with the amount of marketing Insomniac gave it before release. Then again, the 7th console generation wasn't so kind towards cartoony 3D platformers, so A Crack in Time probably got overshadowed by more photorealistic titles, particularly Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. At least it got high praise, with an 87 on Metacritic, but I find it weird that it's rated lower than Tools of Destruction, considering A Crack in Time seems to be more beloved. Just like with Quest for Booty, I recorded footage of A Crack in Time on my PS3, while using a somewhat faulty controller. The L1 button is a little sticky, so it sometimes zooms in by itself. A bigger problem I found while recording this game is that the D-pad often goes haywire, which gets really annoying as it selects gadgets at random. I'll try to mitigate these issues as much as I can in my footage selection.
Luckily for Ratchet, Captain Copernicus L. Quark was on the case. His mission, rescue the Lombax's one and only friend.
Clank is stuck with Dr. Nefarious at the Great Clock. Clank meets Sigmund, junior caretaker of the Great Clock, who teaches Clank to become the clock's senior caretaker, like his father Orvis before him. Meanwhile, Ratchet and Quark fly to the Briga system to look for Clank. Ratchet eventually meets a Lombax named Alistair Azimuth, who has ties to Ratchet's father, Caden. Ratchet learns about the Great Clock from him, how Clank is probably trapped there, and that Nefarious probably aims to use the clock for his nefarious deeds. So while Clank aims to fulfill his destiny, Ratchet's goal is to save Clank and defeat Nefarious.
I'll escort you here to a conveniently exposed thermal exhaust port. We will then endure rigorous calisthenics until we have lost enough body fat to squeeze through the port.
Maybe I should handle this part of the mission.
Sure, that sounds quicker.
That was just the basic premise, and there's already a lot going on here. The game opens with apparently Clank's dad talking about his son and that Clank's actual name is XJ0461. Pretty big reveals right from the get-go. Nefarious and Lawrence are back, and they're as delightful as ever. I love the scene where Nefarious tells Clank about the Great Clock and that it was constructed in the exact center of the universe.
Give or take 50 feet.
The way that scene ends always gives me chills. Nefarious dropping the hardest line as the camera pulls out to reveal the scope of the Great Clock, as well as the game's title. What a banger of an intro, we're already off to a great start. Given that Ratchet and Clank are separated, the narrative is basically split between two main characters, which is a very unique take that makes so much sense for a duo game sequel. It is sad that they're not together for most of the story, but that makes their eventual reunion hit so much harder, and both characters are in good company until then. Clank is mainly accompanied by junior caretaker Sigmund throughout the Great Clock, and he's a pretty charming robot who can be funny every now and then.
What do they say? Never put off today what you've already done yesterday. No, that's not right. Always do today what you didn't put off yesterday. Nope, that wasn't it either. Yeah, well, it was something about doing stuff and when it should be done.
When Clank enters the mnemonic chamber, aka his subconscious, he's guided by a simulation of Orvus. This is a very fascinating way to have father-son bonding moments, complete with dad jokes and baseball.
Good show! It very much reminds me of a sport I read about once called baseball.
Ratchet's companions are even better. One of them is the hilarious Captain Copernicus Leslie Quark, who, despite not being as funny as he was in Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal, still cracks me up in this game with his lines and behavior.
This door is ajar.
Oh, brother.
Hey, how come you get all the cool weapons?
The other companion is the Lombax Alistair Azimuth, who isn't Ratchet's father, but often talks about him, and does feel like a father figure.
I recognize all of this. There's a rock ledge down there we used to hoverboard off of, straight into nothingness. I was scared the first time, but your father, he didn't blink. Feels like yesterday.
I love his presence, as well as the stories he tells, and it's so much fun sticking proximity bombs to him. All these lovely companions make it so that I don't feel too alone playing as either Ratchet or Clank, while my best friend is somewhere else. I love Ratchet in this game. This might actually be my favorite iteration of him, even though he doesn't develop as much as he did in the original. I don't think he needs to, however, as this Ratchet is essentially the result of a protagonist who has already gone through most of his development. In my Quest for Booty review, I found it a missed opportunity for Ratchet not to deal with his mistreatment of Clank back in Tools of Destruction, which isn't a focus in A Crack in Time either, but there's fortunately way more to Ratchet's character here than there was in that short in-between equal. The conflict that does take focus is of his longing for family, whether it be Clank or the Lombaxes, and he's forced to choose between them. Then again, it's not so hard to choose when Clank claims that turning back time can destroy the entire universe. Clank is always right, after all, which Ratchet learned after having wrongfully mistrusted him in Tools of Destruction, and Ratchet's bond with Clank is much stronger than it is with some dead Lombaxes he's never even met. What's truly beautiful about Ratchet's character in this game is that despite how long and hard he searched for Clank, he loves Clank enough to let him go, accepting Clank's decision to fulfill his own destiny, even though that means they'll be separated. Bear in mind, he accepts this even after his chance to find the Lombaxes has been deemed impossible, and after he was forced to kill the only living Lombax other than him. Ratchet's strength is unparalleled, and I'm not even talking about his combat prowess. It makes sense why he's so mature and badass in this game, and I'm glad he can still make me laugh with his charming quips.
Detention wing? Wow, I can't believe that worked.
What was that?
Nothing.
Clank is also very strong in this game. He discovers that he has a father and that he's expected to inherit Orvus' responsibilities, so he works towards that. However, after deciding to follow his destiny, he makes the tough decision to leave it all and join his best friend. Clank explains it perfectly.
Discovering my family has made me realize that I cannot leave Ratchet. Not until he finds his own.
What a beautiful line that is, leading to my favorite ending in gaming. The story already made me incredibly emotional at many points, particularly that goodbye hug, but the ending really sealed the deal. The parallels between Ratchet and Clank in this game are amazing. I love how they both try to satisfy their biological families, only to realize that their found family matters more. Their separation may have been sad, but it allowed the writers to put the main duo through new challenges that yielded so much powerful emotion. As much as I love Ratchet and Clank in this game, the newcomer Alistair Azimuth is probably the game's best written character. This is a tremendous feat considering that most Ratchet and Clank characters introduced after the PlayStation 2 era aren't all that interesting, but Azimuth is one of a kind. He's essential for making a Crack in Time story as engaging as it is, introducing the game's central conflict, creating the most shocking twists, and contributing to some of the most emotional moments. First of all, it's pretty wild that he's a Lombax, as they're an extinct species, so that in and of itself is a big twist. It's later revealed that he was cast out by the Lombaxes after entrusting Percival Tachyon with Lombax technology, leading to the Lombaxes' extinction. It makes a lot of sense then that he would want to use the Great Clock to rewind time and save the Lombaxes, so that catastrophe would never happen in the first place. It's a great way to tie the game's main plot device to his motivation. Azimuth guilt trips Ratchet into following his motivation, making it Ratchet's purpose as well. When Ratchet is later convinced by Clank that it's a bad idea, Azimuth feels betrayed, but that doesn't stop him from saving Ratchet and Clank near the end of the game. However, after Ratchet's stance is unmoved, Azimuth goes so far as to kill Ratchet.
I said stop!
Of course, Ratchet does get brought back by Clank, but it's still a really shocking twist, especially considering you just killed Dr. Nefarious, who is built up as the game's final boss. But now, Ratchet is forced to kill his own father figure. I love it when Azimuth tells Ratchet he'll kill him in the present and save him in the past. It's such a crazy line. In the end, Azimuth finally sees the merit to Clank's warnings as the Great Clock is breaking down around him, so he corrects his mistake by stopping the clock while sacrificing himself.
Take care of yourself, Ratchet.
A fascinating debate regarding Azimuth's character is whether he values fixing his mistakes over the consequences that they bring. Does he want the Lombaxes to survive? Of course. Does he want the universe to remain intact? Sure. But is he even more enticed by the idea of being the savior instead of the failure? Maybe. Questions like these make Azimuth such a fascinating character to think about. I'd say he's the most thought-provoking RNC character since Captain Quark. Captain Quark is great in this game. He's definitely not as interesting as he was in the original trilogy, but that's a really high bar to be fair, and I think A Crack in Time is Quark's best appearance after that. He's still a bumbling fool, but he actually acts quite heroic as he helps Ratchet and Clank, which shows some good development on his part. Perhaps he's the most mature he's ever been too, and it seems he's finally become the hero he always wanted to be. This makes him very likable, while still feeling like the same old Quark we love to hate.
Well, I'll be Scrunch's uncle.
First Scrunch's sister and now his aunt? This guy just won't quit monkeying around. Ratchet still gets annoyed at Quark, but has warmed up to him a bit through their travels together, whereas Clank hasn't seen Quark since Tools of Destruction, so you can't fault him for applying Quark's appearance to the enemies in Clank's subconscious. At least I love Quark, and he might be the funniest character in A Crack in Time.
It's good to see you, Ratchet. Now we need to find a way out. What's your name? The child. Hurl yourself into this laser wall as hard as you can.
His scenes are seriously hilarious. I love it when he's thwarted by technology.
So return my sidekick's pal before I bring the thunder. You win again, technology.
His whole scene at the Battleplex is amazing.
This thing's trying to eat me!
This Lombax is young. He does not understand that being a hero is 45% strength, 60% bravery, and 10% raw intelligence.
That's 115%!
You're welcome.
His plan to infiltrate Dr. Nefarious' space station is brilliant, complete with his trademark crayon animation. The smoke bombs he buys for 5 bolts leads to probably the funniest punchline in the game.
Hang on, cadets! Well, that was 5 bolts wasted.
Also, I love the way he acts as Nurse Shannon. He truly kills that persona. Another contender for the game's funniest character is obviously Dr. Nefarious, who makes a triumphant return after having been absent for so long. He's just as over the top as he was in Up Your Arsenal, and it's impressive that he never comes off as annoying, but rather comical.
How do you like my asteroid flinger 5000?
I had it installed in the event I ever needed a super ironic death scenario.
It's wonderful to see him break down again while playing clips from Lance and Janice.
I don't have the capacity for love, Janice. I was cursed by a tribe of gypsy ninjas when I was a kid.
I know, Lance. I was in that tribe of gypsy ninjas.
Nefarious rehearsing a dumb play he made with his robot lackeys is so great.
Lawrence! I'm rehearsing my epic romantic action comedy space opera!
The dude actually has the audacity to celebrate the victory in a fighting game against a head who can't even use his controller.
Victory! In your face!
Nefarious even managed to brainwash an entire Fongoid village to worship him. The way they regurgitate his propaganda is so funny.
I enjoy working for Dr. Nefarious.
A day without Dr. Nefarious is like a day without sunshine.
The cutscene where he rants about the turmoil Ratchet, Clank, and Quark put him through is hysterical. It's the same cutscene that delivers Quark's incredible punchline. This cutscene also reveals Nefarious' motives, that he wants to use the Great Clock to go back in time and give villains new opportunities to win. Some people might take issue with his old motivation of exterminating the squishies taking a backseat, but it's still partly there. It's just that he's more fed up with heroes at this point. I love his new motivation. It's a great way to reinforce the importance of the Great Clock, and the idea of turning back time to create a world in which the heroes always lose is so good. I also love Nefarious' final scene, where he's ultimately killed. It's such a fitting way for him to go out, completely breaking down while playing sound from different Holovision programs.
Oh, come on! Snap out of it!
It's also amazing that he sent into his space station's eye, causing the same scar he got from Ratchet in the past. Now that's brilliant poetic justice. It's interesting that his butler Lawrence abandoned him, meaning he survived whereas Nefarious didn't. If only that were true. Nefarious works best when Lawrence is present, and that he is. He doesn't have as much screen time as he did in Up Your Arsenal, but he's used well. Lawrence is also one of the game's funniest characters, giving the best roasts, especially towards his partner. I love that you get to hear some of these while Ratchet is disguised as Nefarious. It's glorious.
All attempts to contact your lady friend have been unsuccessful. Perhaps she thought about marrying you and decided to make a run for it.
The ability to impersonate Nefarious is amazing in and of itself, especially since Ratchet still keeps his short stature. I love that you can command Nefarious minions to dance and piss off, including Nurse Shannon.
I order you to boogie!
What? No theme music? Time for phase 3.
Clank's dad Orvis is a very charming old guy. He laughs at his own dad jokes and is generally a boomer, but the fact that he's got none other than Mario's voice actor makes it work better than you'd expect.
Well done. You certainly cleaned their clocks. Did you see what I did there? Oh my.
Orvis is just super wholesome. I love how supportive he is of Clank, and it's his touching words that close out the game in the best way possible.
You are an intelligent and logical being, Clank. But intelligence and logic would have been wasted gifts without honor and loyalty. I am proud to see you came into those on your own.
Sigma 0426A, better known as Sigmund, is another nice bot. He admits to having been affected by Orvis' own sense of humor, so he also delivers some cheesy jokes, which is fun. He's a likable junior caretaker that supports Clank, which Clank rewards him for by promoting him to senior caretaker. Sigmund's reaction to that is so wholesome.
Senior caretaker? Yay! Thank you, sir.
He also has moments of badassery and vulnerability, taking on a crazed Azimuth, and the scene where he replays Orvis' final message is so sad.
Please don't go.
End recording.
It's dangerous.
I would also like to highlight some of the writing from the space radio hosts and commercials. Gotta love the comedic duo Rusty Pete and Captain Slag being the hosts for pirate radio. They continue their squabbling in between banger rock music.
Oh, Pete, you're spilling grog all over the switchboard. For the love of Sony, you're ruining our studio.
And you're projecting your anger on me to cover an unconscious but deep-seated resentment towards a patriarch who never hugged you. We'll be right back.
DJ Maximilian Sane from Deep Space Jams has such a soothing voice that says some out-of-pocket stuff on occasion.
Got another dedication here, this time for Vance Sorbo. Vance, I know you cheated on me with my sister Victoria. I'm coming for you. Oh, Vance, old friend, I think the word of the day is hotel. All right.
I enjoy the turbulent dynamic between the news anchors Kip Darling and Pepper Fairbanks. They seriously can't stand working together.
Our station manager has a holo pic of the Lumbacks and... oh, he is cute.
Way to be professional, Pepper.
Bite me, Kip.
I love that they interviewed Dr. Nefarious about the season finale of Lance and Janice at some point. Nefarious being furious having been left on a cliffhanger.
It was a cliffhanger! How annoying is that? Why didn't they just finish the story? The writers on that show should be annihilated!
Thanks, Doctor.
The space radio has so many fun commercials as well, many of which involve Captain Quark, such as Q-Por.
Tired of those unsightly blemishes? Fed up with covering up? Then try Q-Por, my new moisturizing lotion pending approval from the Pan-Galactic Health Administration.
There's also trailers for Unicop and My Blaster Runs Hot, the movie. There's even an unsettling audio recording from the set of the latter film where Quark goes too far.
Completely my bad.
That's it! Is this a real blaster? Can I shoot this guy?
Quark will surely get cancelled for that one. The trailer for The Boy and the Wargrok sounds really emotional, and it's interesting that it's set on Veldin.
A story of sacrifice.
I love you, Wargrok. I always will.
It's so cool that there's an ad from Big Al, harking back to his original appearance. I wish we could see him too. We never got to see his future design.
Does your VG9000 Omega Watt game station require modification? Are your cleaner bots still running an obsolete processing software? Then come on down for the grand reopening of Big Al's Robo Shack and Gaming Superstore!
Although I love A Crack in Time's writing, I can't deny that it has its fair share of problems, including retcons, plot holes, and unanswered questions. The narrative keeps Tools of Destruction's retcon of Ratchet never having seen another Lombax, even though he clearly saw Angela Cross back in Going Commando. You might argue that she isn't a Lombax, but Insomniac makes no effort to confirm this. There's a space radio program where Kip Darling and Pepper Fairbanks actually acknowledge Angela Cross and debate whether she is a Lombax, but they don't arrive at a clear answer, and the information given seems to lean more towards her being a Lombax anyway.
Tonight's top story, new information on the disappearance of Lombax rebel Angela Cross.
I'm sorry, have we confirmed that Angela Cross is in fact a Lombax? I know that was the assumption, but she doesn't have a tail.
Female Lombaxes don't have tails, Kip.
Even if she wasn't a Lombax, you'd think both Ratchet and Angela would react to their similar appearance back in Going Commando, but of course, the Lombax extinction narrative didn't exist back then, so it's clearly a retcon. This retcon made Ratchet appear to be the chosen one instead of just some random guy, and A Crack in Time does the same with Clank. Clank's origin used to be that his mom, the Quartu Robot Factory, made him to be a defective robot who would rebel against Chairman Drek. But A Crack in Time gives Clank a father and claims that he designed Clank to be like that, and eventually inherit his responsibilities as senior caretaker at the Great Clock. You might argue against this being a retcon and rather a recontextualization, but it's a pretty odd scenario that had no foreshadowing leading up to it, at least not back in the original game. Furthermore, it makes it so that Ratchet and Clank were always destined to meet each other, instead of that chance meeting being complete happenstance, which removes the coincidental beauty of the first game. A Crack in Time's writing also creates some gaping plot holes. Orvis gives Clank clear instructions that the Great Clock is not to be used as a time machine, as that could destroy the universe. Even though it's a bit of a deus ex machina, I'm fine with Clank realizing that turning back time by as little as 6 minutes is fine, as it had been set up earlier by the all-knowing god that is the plumber, and I feel that short amount of time wouldn't be too much of a leap anyway. However, what is a leap is Clank telling Sigmund to create time portals that go as far back as 10 whole years. First of all, that's a long time that would surely lead to plenty of consequences. And second, it's so weird that Clank and Sigmund are just fine with doing this without even discussing it beforehand. I suppose the universe doesn't get destroyed because they're not actually using the Great Clock, and instead exploiting time rifts, but that creates other plot holes. If they can do this all willy-nilly, then why don't they try to rescue Orvis again? And better yet, why can't Ratchet and Azimuth use this method to save the Lombaxes? So many problems can be solved with these time portals, which is another reason they're problematic from a writing standpoint. I love the gameplay mechanics they lead to, but in terms of writing, they're probably the game's worst offenders, leading to so many questions that don't get answered. Speaking of unanswered questions, A Crack in Time story has some big ones, which is peculiar when this is supposedly the final entry in the Future series. Nothing gets done about the Lombaxes, and maybe that's the point, although Ratchet does say that they'll eventually find them, just with a different method than one that'll potentially destroy the universe. Max Apogee is still missing, along with Angela Cross apparently, and Talwyn Apogee is only mentioned in this game, even though she was a prominent character in the previous 2 games. RNC games don't keep their female characters for long, I suppose. What's weird is that even though these big questions are left unanswered, A Crack in Time still feels like a proper conclusion, not just to the Future trilogy, but the entire series. Ratchet and Clank finally reunite, they finally kill their archenemy Dr. Nefarious, and they finally fulfill their purpose. The ending does suggest that Ratchet and Clank's adventures may continue, which did happen, and Nefarious' death did get retconned, but it also feels very conclusive, like this is the climax of Ratchet and Clank's long journey together. It's still my favorite ending in a game, and it seems most others also love it, so it clearly worked despite not answering everything. With all these writing problems in mind, I myself don't take too much issue with them. Furthermore, I can accept some faulty writing if it leads to interesting opportunities as a result, which I think is the case here. Of course the problems still remain, and the writing could have been better without them, but I'd rather take interesting writing decisions that create logical inconsistencies than writing that's completely logical but yields nothing of interest. Ideally, the writing for a work is logically foolproof while also being really interesting, which unfortunately isn't the case for A Crack in Time, so I can't say the writing is perfect.
Poor fools! They've forgotten what it means to battle a Lombax.
A Crack in Time's gameplay is exceptional. I praised the other games in the Future trilogy for having smooth movement and controls, and they're even smoother in this game. This is especially the case for Clank, whose gameplay has been completely overhauled. Before, the gameplay wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly that good either, halting the pace and making me wish I played as Ratchet instead. A Crack in Time meanwhile steps up Clank's gameplay considerably, and Insomniac were so confident in these improvements that they had no qualms making you play as Clank before Ratchet. Clank is much faster than he's been before, and he has a triple jump, which sounds broken, but it works perfectly considering how big the gaps tend to be between platforms. He's slow to descend, but fortunately, helipack jumps can be cancelled with triangle or R2, which is a speedrun strat I'm not sure that many are aware of. If that wasn't enough, Clank now has a melee weapon akin to Ratchet's Omni-Wrench, called the Chronoscepter. This scepter is very satisfying to use, with its big swings and meteor smash combo. It allows Clank to strafe, which comes especially in handy when you have to deflect projectiles with it. The scepter even enables Clank to throw time bombs that slow down enemies and objects, which allows for some fun strategies in platforming. I also love that using the scepter to smash broken objects fixes them. It's a cool paradox. The best aspect of Clank gameplay is the ingenious time puzzles in the Great Clock. In these, you record Clank's actions up to 4 times, which work in tandem to unlock a door for the real Clank to pass through. These are by far the best puzzles in all of Ratchet and Clank. They're so clever and unique, and would be able to carry a standalone puzzle game on their own. The first few puzzles are really simple as you'd expect, but they get relatively complicated by the end, and there are even tougher ones you can do after you've beaten the game. Seriously, the bonus ones are real head scratchers where every second matters. I like that the game rewards you with a golden shower after doing these puzzles. It's an addictive feedback loop. Clank's other type of puzzle where you clear planets of time rifts isn't nearly as good, and halts the pace in Sector 3 of the Great Clock. It can still be fun though, and I like how it affects some of the planets Ratchet can visit, so that he can fetch gold bolts that were previously unavailable. Ratchet's gameplay is also amazing. Like I said, A Crack in Time's gameplay feels incredibly smooth, and Ratchet's Omni-Wrench Millennium 12 greatly contributes to that. Before, Ratchet would stop in his tracks when throwing his wrench, but in this game, he continues at the same pace every time you throw it, which is such a wonderful quality of life improvement. I love throwing it around everywhere I go, sometimes just to do it, without a target in mind, and it also makes breaking crates so much more satisfying. This is the same wrench as the one Quest for Booty introduced, so it still comes with the awesome kinetic tether and ability to carry and throw certain objects. It could feel a bit awkward to use in that game, but here it's more intuitive. I love that it's so ingrained into the gameplay. You can even use it on some enemies to remove their shields. All these improvements make the wrench the most practical it's ever been. It might not be that useful in combat, but that's where the other weapons come in. A Crack in Time's weapon roster is really good and fairly big, having 17 weapons. Most of these are original, with 5 returning from Tools of Destruction, and unlike in Quest for Booty, the selection of returning weapons is actually great. Sure, there's no Alpha Disruptor, and we just narrowly missed out on getting the Chad Razor Claws back, but I'll happily take Mr. Zircon, the Groovitron, the Negotiator, the Buzzblades, and the Magnet Launcher. At least I used to love Mr. Zircon before his comedy became stale, but I still appreciate having him by my side in A Crack in Time, as I tend to feel lonely without Clank. The Groovitron contributes even more epic music and dances. It's nice that both of these former devices can now be leveled up, the Groovitron for example eventually exploding as it drops to the dance floor. The Negotiator is still a trusty rocket launcher, and the Magnet Launcher is still an effective restraining weapon. A Crack in Time actually turned the Buzzblades into one of my favorite weapons in the franchise, firing more rapidly than they did in Tools of Destruction and quickly racking up damage. I'd say they're the perfected version of the throwing star type weapon. The selection of new weapons might be equally good. Ratchet starts with the Constructo Pistol, which is part of a unique line of modifiable weapons, also including the Constructo Bomb, which you can soon buy, and the Constructo Shotgun, which you can eventually win at the Battleplex Arena. These are fun to mess around with and modify to your liking, getting more options as you find more Constructo mods scattered throughout the Briga system. The Constructor weapons aren't exactly the most powerful, but you can get some mileage out of them by for example applying stun to the Constructor Shotgun and creating a minefield with the Constructor Bomb's proximity bombs. Proximity bombs can also turn your companions into suicide bombers, which is fun. Early on, you can also buy the Sonic Eruptor, which becomes kind of useless later on, but I want to highlight it because of its fascinating concept. It uses a living creature called the Xenogoat, which produces a loud mating call that sounds like a burp. Very surreal, but very funny and inventive, and it's cool that the damage it deals is timing based, being most powerful when its cheeks are completely inflated. Another funny weapon that involves a living creature is the Rift Inducer 5000, which teleports a chill monster named Fred from another dimension who drags enemies into his own. It's not as practical as Up Your Arsenal's Rift Inducer, but it is very powerful. The Spiral of Death is another cool concept, functioning similarly to a boomerang, as it shoots out a spiral that returns to you. This means it can deal double damage if it hits an enemy twice, which is fun to attempt. Fun fact, this weapon was designed by a fan and was the winner of the My Blaster Runs Hot weapon contest. I wish I knew about this contest while it was happening, and it's a shame that Insomniac hasn't held such a contest since. I have so many juicy weapon ideas I made out of Lego when I was a kid, so I might have had a chance to win or enter the top 5. Anywho, the Spiral of Death is a great weapon, one of the best in the game, so I'm glad it won. The Chimp-O-Matic is also one of my favorite weapons of this game, turning enemies into monkeys quite efficiently, especially when it's leveled up. I like how the monkey design depends on whether you're turning a robot or a squishy, and I find it funny that Nefarious turns into one of the squishy monkeys, meaning he's still one of them deep down. It's a shame that you can't turn other bosses into monkeys. It would have been funny to defeat Azimuth that way. It's an even bigger shame that the Chimp-O-Matic can produce the most annoying glitch in the game, in which its beam persists, along with its grating noise, which doesn't go away until you die, visit a level, or restart the game. There are some other irritating glitches in this game, but not enough to bring the game down, fortunately. Finally, there's the Rhino 5, which might actually be my favorite weapon in all of gaming. I remember seeing it in the PAX weapon trailer, and although its name didn't get revealed at that point, I immediately knew that it would be the game's Rhino. It's such a striking design, with its big scale and multiple barrels, that fires countless bullets and rockets in quick succession. I also love its color palette and those green swirly things on the back. If that wasn't enough, the Rhino 5 plays the music from that PAX trailer, none other than Tchaikovsky's bombastic 1812 overture, which fits perfectly. Given that it shoots so rapidly, it doesn't last the longest, but its massive ammo count of 1,500 to 3,000 at max level makes it so that the fun lasts for a while. Besides, it's easy to replenish ammo for it, making for basically infinite use in places like the Battleplex. All that said, this Rhino is surprisingly weak. Sure, it is really powerful and effective, but previous Rhinos could kill durable enemies and bosses much quicker. While it is weird for a Rhino to be so weak, I'm not complaining, as that means I can spend longer using it. You also spend a long time getting it, as this Rhino, just like the Rhino 4, includes a hunt for 10 holoplants over the course of the game in order to get it. I'm glad Insomniac kept this system, as it encourages exploration. For as fun as these weapons are to use, I must admit that a Crack in Time's combat is a bit of a downgrade. I'm not quite sure how to put it, but it just doesn't feel as satisfying as the combat in the likes of Going Commando, Up Your Arsenal, Deadlocked, and Tools of Destruction. Despite this, the Gladiatorial Arena might be the best outside of Deadlocked. The Battleplex comes with 4 whole tournaments, first Bronze, followed up by Silver, then Gold, and eventually Platinum, so there's a lot of content here, and the challenges are quite varied. Many of them are well thought out on top of that, and often change the layout of the stage. The one where you have to use a fusion turret to shoot cluster bombs is particularly inspired. Your objective here isn't to kill the Egorians, but you definitely should kill some of them with missiles, because it'll be near impossible to not get hit when their numbers grow so big. There are also numerous Egorians in the Extinction Challenge, which is really hard in an otherwise easy game, especially on the harder difficulties. The final challenge isn't particularly hard, unless you gun for the no-hit skill point, which I didn't bother getting this time, but I have managed to achieve it a few times in previous playthroughs. I'm glad this game contains a final arena challenge that lasts many rounds, even though 20 isn't anywhere near Going Commando 60 or Up Your Arsenal's 100. The Battleplex gives you tremendous rewards for beating the challenges, including gold bolts, Sony, Constructomods, holoplans, and even 4 of the best weapons in the roster, giving strong incentives to complete all the tournaments. An arena isn't the only thing the Battleplex has to offer. Just like in Up Your Arsenal, a Crack in Time comes with a game within the game, this one being called My Blaster Runs Hot. It's definitely not as fun as the Captain Quark vidcomics, but it's still quite enjoyable, and it's nice that you still play as Quark, or Rusty Pete if you're player 2 in co-op mode. That's an odd couple, but I vibe with it. There aren't levels here, the objective is just to get the highest score possible, although you do get a trophy if you hit 10,000 points. I've seen many who find that achievement basically impossible to accomplish, and sure, it's not easy, but if you try hard enough, you should be able to do it. I got it on my first try during this playthrough, but to be fair, I'm somewhat of a pro at this. My high score is 31,090 after all. Back when the online leaderboards were active, I seem to recall I was part of the top 100 overall, though that was with a lower score of 22,090, so I should be even higher today. If I remember correctly, the top scorer had over 80,000 points, which is pretty goddamn insane. I miss being able to view those leaderboards. I would've flexed on y'all with proof if I could. I bet you didn't know there's a boss fight in My Blaster Runs Hot. As is tradition, the arena comes with 2 boss fights, namely the Wargrok and the Elite Hydra Tank. The Wargrok is very fun to fight, and I really like the challenge where you have to fight him wrench only amidst poisonous gas. The Elite Hydra Tank is a bit strange to have as a boss here, as they're not very different from regular Hydra tanks that can be found elsewhere, but it's still a pretty good battle. A Crack in Time has many more bosses, more than 10 overall, and the selection is really good. Sure, the Valkyrie ship fights in space are pretty boring, but at least you can speed up the second one using the grav tether. Clank's only boss fight is actually one of the best. It's against the hypersonic brainwave scrambler, which has been causing havoc throughout the Great Clock, so it's satisfying to finally lay the smackdown on him, especially with Clank's amazing newfound abilities. Slowing him down with time bombs to catch up with him, smacking his projectiles back at him, and pushing him away feels so good. The VX-99 in Axiom City is a whole operation, which might take a bit long, but it's nonetheless really cool to take him down. It's just a shame that he's so weak when you finally get to his true body. Just look how fast I can destroy him, it's ridiculous, especially with the Rhino 5. The last 3 bosses are undoubtedly the best. Dr. Nefarious is always fun to fight, and while nothing beats his boss battle by the end of Up Your Arsenal, his boss fight by the end of A Crack in Time is amazing, probably my favorite of the game. He has such a varied moveset, some of it being reminiscent of his previous fight, and you're forced to move and jump a lot to avoid being caught in his attacks. There's even some hover booting involved, which can be janky and lead to unexpected deaths, but the epic spectacle makes it worthwhile. The gameplay in the final boss against Azimuth isn't quite as good, but the atmosphere and context makes it so special. You're fighting the only other Lombax Ratchet knows, a father figure that has been with him for most of the journey, to the death, in a battle with universe-ending stakes. The music and visuals illustrate this perfectly. The gameplay might not be the best, but it's still really good, and you constantly have to be on your feet against his quick attacks. I like how he occasionally deflects your bullets, forcing you to use your wrench, which can also be used while chasing him on hover boots. At some point he breaks parts of the floor, meaning you have to watch your steps so you don't suddenly fall to your death. Speaking of death, there's also a post-game fight against Lord Vorsalon. You fight this guy 2 times beforehand, and both instances are pretty good, but really easy, whereas the last encounter is actually really difficult, at least on hardcore mode. He might not deal too much damage, but it's easy to get hit by him, so a good strategy is to neutralize him when he performs the attacks that are hard to dodge, with the likes of the Magnet Launcher, Cryomine Glove, Groovitron, and a stunning Constructo Shotgun. I use these a lot, so I eventually run out of ammo, which goes for the other weapons too, so you need to conserve your ammo to the best of your ability. It's not like you can just rely on your Rhino 5 either, due to its aforementioned weakness. This is thus a fantastic boss fight that truly tests your abilities and forces you to use everything you have at your disposal, making it probably the best boss fight of the game on a critical level. I might prefer the previous 2 fights because of their impact though. A Crack in Time has surprisingly few gadgets, only 4 in total, and I like that they're assigned to the D-pad, making for easy access. Of course, the ever-present swing shot is one of them, which is the quintessential RNC gadget that I never get tired of using. The other 3 gadgets are new, including the Omnisoaker, which is a fun little device that can harness substances like water, nectar, and oil. The way it can pump up plants with water to bounce on makes it similar to a gelinator, only more restricted, as the plants are situated in specific spots. It's fun to use nectar to distract tetramites from killing you and to unlock certain rooms, and oil can be used as an unusual combat method that involves friendly fire. After Ratchet and Clank reunite, Clank can throw time bombs while playing as Ratchet, which I don't often do, but it can be quite handy in certain situations. Something I've always scratched my head over is that the inventory says the time bomb is level 1. Does that mean it can level up? I'm guessing it can't, but I barely used it over the years, so how would I know? Clank gives you the option to use the helipack as well, but it's not part of the gadget wheel, and is basically inconsequential now that you have the hover boots. I would mourn the loss of the thruster pack, but it's not really needed in this game. Neither is the Hydro Pack, as this game actually doesn't contain any swimming, which is a bit of a letdown, but it's not a big loss. There's just 1 gadget left in this incredibly thin lineup, but this last one might as well be worth 5, as it's an essential gadget that completely changes the game for the better. I'm of course talking about the legendary hover boots. Clankless Ratchet moves relatively slowly across fairly big levels, but as soon as you get these bad boys, you can get from one place to another in no time, while having loads of fun along the way. It even comes with a hover function, making up for Clank's absence. That's not to say the hover boots can replace Clank, but they're a wonderful alternative. They complement the grand level design so well, especially when the levels accommodate them with speed ramps and whatnot. I especially love the fast-paced hoverboot courses that some levels include, like Torrent 4 and Lumos, that are some of my favorite levels in the whole franchise. Lumos literally is my favorite one, it's just pure gameplay perfection. The hoverboots are undoubtedly one of the best gadgets and traversal methods in all of RNC. I'll admit they're not perfect, as they can be clunky to steer along with the camera while using them, and they wouldn't be perfected until Rift Apart over a decade later. Still, the hoverboots are one of A Crack in Time's greatest innovations, making the game much better than it already was. The fast-paced nature of the hoverboots complement the game's vast opportunity for exploration, in a game that's riddled with juicy collectibles. Across the Briga system, there are 40 gold bolts, 40 Sony, 21 constructor mods, and 10 holoplans. Now that's a lot of stuff to find, and they all give something of value. Gold bolts are always satisfying to collect, especially in this game where they shower you with bolts. Some of them are ridiculously easy to find, but others are really well hidden, particularly those that are blocked by time rifts that Clank clears later. Gold bolts still give you skins, and there's a really cool selection of them, with the likes of Dan Johnson, Azimuth, and Dr. Nefarious. You can unlock additional skins with other methods, like Banjo Ratchet by applying a code in the menu, and even a Captain Ratchet hat by having played Quest for Booty. That skin is my favorite. The pirate hat is so dope, and it allows you to see Ratchet's face even while wearing the final armor. I've already explained the constructor mods and holoplans, so it's time to talk about the Sony. You actually collect living Sony in this game, and these are the most fun collectibles to get. You often have to chase them down, which can lead to entertaining set pieces. They're initially used to fix your ship Aphelion, but are later used to upgrade her with weapons, shields, and boosters for the spaceship gameplay. That's right, you can play as Aphelion in space, but unlike previous RNC games where ship sections are combat only, here you can also explore space and do activities within different sectors. Although it is a bit sad that there's no loading screen where you travel from place to place anymore, I do prefer being able to steer the ship myself. My first time seeing the galactic map filled me with dopamine, and there's a lot you can do within each sector. You can help people with tasks throughout each sector in exchange for bolts, and these missions aren't always that fun to do, but there are some memorable ones.
Warlock would cross a river of fire to win your heart, Sugar Plum.
My weapons are still armed. I can make it look like an accident.
That's okay, Aphelion.
One of them involves chasing a comet while harvesting its materials, and the Kortho sector has a series of tasks where you help two rivals sabotage each other's marketing, which is funny stuff. Some of the space tasks involve combat, which is definitely the weakest aspect of this gameplay, as it's just not very engaging. Still, I love being able to fly around these sectors, and my favorite thing about them is to land on the moons and play as Ratchet. These moons are spherical, like the ones from Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal, which was an innovative concept that I'm glad Insomniac decided to bring back for a crack in time. They may not be as impressive as the ones from Super Mario Galaxy, but I love exploring these moons, especially the ones that put a heavy emphasis on hoverboot traversal. Many of these come with fast-paced hoverboot tracks that make for some exhilarating platforming. I love that these moons often involve a lot of platforming, and it's nice to have some combat sprinkled in as well. The moons that are combat only can be a little tame, but they're fortunately a minority. After you've collected all of the 40 Sony and killed Lord Vorsalon, you can visit a new moon, the Insomniac Moon, which is where a Crack in Time's Insomniac Museum is located. It's a triumphant return for the museum, which was last featured 5 years prior in Up Your Arsenal. A Crack in Time's iteration of the Insomniac Museum is definitely my favorite, as it's so packed with content. It actually takes me 2 whole hours to explore the entire museum and read all the text boxes. You might argue that this is a bad thing, since that means so much content was cut, and while it is unfortunate, my counter-argument is that most games have cut content, but don't show much of it, whereas this game turns its cut content into a big explorable level, where you can read about what was cut and sometimes even experience it for yourself. There's a whole unfinished level you can play, which is awesome, and I like that you unlock that area by leading Tetramites to a nest, which you can only do after having found nectar within the museum. It's so nice that even the museum rewards you for exploring. Another cool unfinished level you can play is a hoverboot racetrack that comes with 2 challenges, and they're indeed quite challenging. There are also randomly generated platforming courses, a very confusingly designed moon filled with portals, and even a cut time bomb puzzle. I understand why it was cut, but honestly, this puzzle is quite fun and would have allowed for more time bomb use as Ratchet. There's an area where you can design 2 Agorian warriors to fight Nefarious Armada, and it's basically impossible to win, but it's still entertaining. Speaking of Agorians, they have a charming little documentary video that you can discover, featuring an animator enacting their cartoony moves. Of course, the late legend Dan Johnson can also be found, this time looking into the distance while pondering the universe. There are some cut weapons and gadgets, some of which looked really fun to use, and I'm especially saddened that the Razor Claw's spiritual successor, the Razor Talons, didn't make the final lineup. The Razor Claws were one of the best weapons in Tools of Destruction, and their inclusion would have given a Crack in Time a much needed melee option. During this playthrough, I actually discovered something I didn't even know about. This tiny Dr. Nefarious roaming a desk, which comes with a text box about Nano Ratchet. Not a big discovery, but it felt big, because I finally found something new in a game I'm so familiar with. Other than the amount of content the Insomniac Museum has, I also love its atmosphere. All white environments tend to be boring, but I actually like it here, as the museum is otherwise filled with so much stuff to look at. Also, the music is one of the best in the soundtrack, it's very catchy. A Crack in Time's gameplay is phenomenal. It features the series' best innovation since Going Commando, reworking some gameplay styles for the better, and there's so much content, even after you've beaten the game. A few aspects have been downgraded, but they may as well be mere raindrops in an ocean of excellence. A Crack in Time's presentation is fantastic, and a major upgrade from Tools of Destruction and Quest for Booty. The new art style is quite appealing, it seems a bit more cel-shaded and cartoony, while offering more realistic lighting. It's a good combination that yields some pleasant visuals. I'll admit the game can go a little overboard on the bloom though, and some of these environments haven't aged the best. They did look fantastic back in the day though, and some of the environments still look pretty, particularly the Great Clock. It comes with so much detail in such a grandiose environment, especially considering Clank's small stature. The yellow and blue color combination works well, and the purple space in the background gives it a unique flavor. Clank's subconscious also has a very distinct look, being mostly white, but also featuring these flashback screens of Clank cutscenes from past games, including the original, which are neat callbacks. Also, the way these floor tiles react to Clank's footsteps is mesmerizing to look at. Most of the game's levels are introduced by beautiful opening shots that are enhanced by nice atmospheric music. Axiom City is probably the best looking level that Ratchet explores. Just look at the sprawling nighttime city featuring so many pretty blue lights. Dr. Nefarious Space Station is my favorite design from the outset. I love how it's just Nefarious' head but inflated. Talk about an egomaniac. The Aztec-like vibe of Quantos is really cool, along with the tribal nature of the Fongoids. And it's neat that some architecture, weapons and robots are designed to look rusty and mechanical. Even though this is the Future series, I like how there's a lot of ancient influence in the game's design philosophy, creating a cool dichotomy of old and new, and the comprehensive lore justifies these decisions. The character models in this game are so damn good, both returning and new ones alike. Ratchet's model is perfect, I still think it's the best he's ever looked. His face doesn't look weird like in Ratchet and Clank games after this, nor too cutesy like in the PlayStation 4 outing, and it's aged better than in previous titles. Ratchet looks mature here, appropriate for his developed character, and his fur is quite detailed. Moreover, his new armor suits him well, no matter the color. Clank's model might also be the best it's ever looked. It's a perfect combination of cute and badass, and his chrome finish is beautiful. Captain Quark meanwhile has looked better. I still miss his butt chin, but his new model is still very good, retaining his chiseled abs and iron-hard guns! Dr. Nefarious looks amazing. Maybe not as cool or threatening as he was in Up Your Arsenal, but his new model is very impressive considering the amount of moving parts and how exaggerated his animations are. Lawrence's model is the definition of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as he looks about the same as he did in Up Your Arsenal, only shinier this time. In terms of new models, Alistair Azimuth has the most striking appearance. He's a Lombax, yet his color scheme is so different from Ratchet and Angela, being white with red stripes instead of yellow with brown ones. It's such a badass combination. It is the same color palette as Kratos from God of War after all. Azimuth's Praetorian guard armor is such a cool fit, and his double-ended Praetorian Omni-Wrench is also sick. Orvis' model admittedly looks a bit weird, akin to Maz Kanata from Star Wars The Force Awakens, but Orvis does look and act cuter than her. Sigmund has a funny robot design, with 3 legs, thick robotic eyebrows, and asymmetric eyes. Not to mention he kind of has the South Park Canadian head going for him. The designs for the different factions look good and distinct too. I like the goat-like and tribal look of the Fongoids, paired with their shiny blue artifacts, particularly their glowing horns. The Terrachnoids aren't ripped out warlocks like they were made out to be in the Iris supercomputer cutscene from Tools of Destruction, but their nerdy vibe makes sense considering they're so intelligent. I like their big heads and Zoidberg mouths. The burly Agorians look really cool, and most of them have such sick weapons and armor pieces equipped, making them look even cooler. The Vollards look very unique and carry these large backpacks that contain plenty of scrap, so they probably have immense back pain. Dr. Nefarious' army looks charming and are animated with funny mannerisms, but they could have been more diverse. A Crack in Time does have a fair share of well-defined designs, but it might be a bit lacking in variety. The cutscenes are where A Crack in Time's presentation truly shines. These are pre-rendered instead of in-engine, which explains why they look better than when you're in gameplay. The already great character models look even better in these cutscenes, as they're so detailed and have such good lighting that gives the characters more dimension, along with the environments and visual effects. These look considerably better than the ones from the other Future Trilogy games. Those games had well-directed cutscenes, but A Crack in Time's cutscenes are on a whole other level. They do such a good job of making me care about the story, no matter how bonkers it may get. One gripe I have with some of them is that they can be too short and thus rushed, affecting the storytelling, but I'm guessing that's because these cutscenes were so graphically intensive. They still hit quite hard in spite of this, as they accentuate the story's dramatic moments so effectively.
Here it is. Your father went to great lengths to protect this room from those who would abuse it.
A Crack in Time doesn't take itself too seriously, however, as there are still some cutscenes that play around with quirkier art styles. The best example of this are the cartoony GrummelNet previews for weapons, which are animated cleanly and contribute to the game's personality and comedy. Furthermore, they give you a better idea of what a weapon is like than simple textual descriptions, and they make getting weapons more fun.
Before you know it, you'll be the last Lombax standing. Buzzblades, available only at GrummelNet.
There are some comic-esque cutscenes every now and then too, adding to the variety. I love that Quark's crayon cutscene gets played through a Viewmaster. It's so playful and creative. So is Sigmund's camera work in the surprisingly dark Orvis cutscene. He probably didn't intend that Dutch angle, but that just adds to the charm of it. The more cinematic tone of the game allowed the voice actors to flex their chops even more than before.
Clank! Wake up!
This might be James Arnold Taylor's best performance as Ratchet, who sounds very mature and confident, even in moments of crisis, which doesn't stop him from being comedic as well.
Will you shut up? We are not gonna die! Aphelion, engage gravimetric stabilizers!
Negative. Stabilizers offline. Thrusters offline. Landing flaps offline.
Alright, so we're gonna die.
He portrays Ratchet's moments of vulnerability very well too.
Okay, no need to panic. We just need to find Lawrence before he takes the escape pod.
David Kay gives another stellar Clank performance, who also has some emotional deliveries.
Ratchet!
I love Clank's badass line after defeating the hypersonic brainwave scrambler, complete with his iconic laughter.
One hypersonic brainwave scrambler scrambled.
That was amazing, sir!
Jim Ward delivers yet another Quark-tastic performance, sounding both dumb and endearing simultaneously.
Space. It's huge. So huge, in fact, that if you lost your car keys in it, they would be almost impossible to find.
Armin Shimmerman kills his return as Dr. Nefarious. It's just perfect over-the-top voice acting.
Have you ever spent time on an asteroid? It's surprisingly boring! Nothing for a villain to do but dwell on his failure!
Michael Bell delivers the hottest roasts with his sultry Lawrence voice.
I'm conducting an omniscan of the Orvis chamber, sir. I must say, the machinery here is quite advanced compared to the malfunctioning bucket of bolts I'm accustomed to dealing with.
Joseph D'Oria captures the nuance of Azimuth's character so well, and he sounds so good while shouting.
Now why aren't you with the Lombaxes?
Because I failed them! I failed them. I made a mistake.
Both Sigmund and Orvis are voiced by video game legends, Nolan North and Charles Martinet respectively, which is probably why the game references Uncharted and Super Mario at some point. While it isn't too hard to hear the similarity between Orvis and Mario, the difference between Sigmund and Nathan Drake is night and day.
I would have sooner endured the wrath of Kublai Khan himself than remove the Chintamani stone from that sacred shrine.
You should have your own theme music, sir. I could trail behind you and be all like, caretaker.
They both sound very endearing, especially the Mario-esque voice of Orvis, who also sounds like Clank when it comes to their accent and mannerisms.
Hello, XJ0461. It's good to see you again. And now it's time for your most important lesson.
The various factions have memorable voices as well. I particularly like how unique the Vollards sound.
A place of rebirth. The trash of one becomes the treasure of another, much like the ruins of Molinoth.
The most mixed aspect of A Crack in Time's presentation is the music. This is the first RNC game to not be composed by David Brusheau, instead being composed by Boris Salchow, who plays a completely different tune. That said, while the music isn't as good as in previous games, it does fit the more cinematic tone of A Crack in Time. Most of the tracks are atmospheric, fitting the environments really well, but not being very memorable outside of the game. That is except for a few tracks, like the peaceful Fongoid theme that appears every now and then. The final boss music against Azimuth is really epic and emotional, especially considering the context.
I didn't want it to be like this! You were supposed to be here, on my side! We could have saved them together!
I also love the credits theme, which sounds like a celebration of the RNC franchise. While these are standouts in a soundtrack that doesn't come close to what the series has had to offer before, I honestly don't have much of a problem with the game's music. Part of that is because the more atmospheric music does well in complementing the game's tone, and for what the main soundtrack lacks in memorable bangers, the space radio makes up for. The atmospheric combination of the gorgeous space visuals paired with the incredible space radio is absolutely magical. This radio comes with 4 different stations, those being House of Synth, Polaris Classical, Deep Space Jams, and Pirate Radio. Polaris Classical is admittedly underwhelming, as it doesn't have a host and only features 2 orchestral tracks that both sound fairly generic, but the other 3 stations are packed with a variety of bangers. House of Synth has electronica music, and my enjoyment of the selection varies, so I don't tend to listen to them much, but some of the tracks are wonderful. Perhaps another reason why I rarely choose House of Synth is because the host DJ Discobot has a pretty annoying voice.
This next track is dedicated to Minerbot Delta from Cleanerbot Zulu. Cleanerbot says 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. Ha ha ha. Good one, Cleanerbot. Here is your song.
DJ Maximilian Sane of Deep Space Jams meanwhile sounds smooth as hell, appropriate for the channel that comes with jazz music.
This is your man on the ones and twos, the one who's all bad news, the DJ with all the grooves, Maximilian Zane.
this is the channel I've listened to the most throughout my many years of playing A Crack in Time, as it comes with the most pleasant music of the bunch, which is perfect for the relaxing atmosphere of space. More recently, I put on the pirate radio a lot, which might actually be my favorite now.
A fine song by a fine band named, Pete?
A band named Pete? I like it.
No, I mean Pete would be the name of the band. Will you just put down the grog and act professional for a moment? The sponsors could be listening.
Well, then they'll be happy to know that grog is delicious.
It helps that the comedic duo Captain Slag and Rusty Pete are the hosts, and that the channel focuses on rock music, which is one of my favorite genres. Most of the tracks are high octane, but there are a few that are more relaxing. There's one in particular that I absolutely adore, the first one on the Pirate Radio tracklist, which is apparently called Dream by AXS Music. Allow me to share a precious memory I have of this track. Back in 2020, I was recording every Insomniac RNC game for my Every Ratchet Clank video game ranked video. Although Going Commando was my number one at the time, I was most looking forward to replaying A Crack in Time, as it had been a while since the last time I had played it. When I entered space, I turned on the pirate radio and Dream came on. I was immediately stricken with pure bliss, and I continued to listen to it as I landed on a moon, the lava one specifically, which looks so nice. The combination of gorgeous imagery and even more beautiful music legitimately brought me to tears, and now, every time I replay A Crack in Time, I have a ritual of recreating that perfect atmosphere. I'm pretty sure using this music is going to make monetization for this video impossible, but this is a moment in gaming worth more than gold to me, so I couldn't possibly pass up this chance to highlight the magnificent music that made it. A review of my favorite video game would be incomplete without it. A Crack in Time's presentation isn't perfect, which is especially the case for the soundtrack, but the new direction does enhance the visual element, and the diamonds in the rough are able to create instances of perfection that outshine any other.
Well, looks like there's just one more thing to fix.
After what has become my longest review, I've explained why Ratchet Clank Future A Crack in Time is my favorite video game. The writing comes with a bunch of retcons and unanswered questions, including plot holes that don't get explained. Even so, the narrative is thoroughly engaging, tugging at the heartstrings and featuring well-written characters, some of which contribute to the game's hilarious comedy. The combat is a bit dumbed down compared to before, especially in space, and the game is not without its repetitive parts. However, the gameplay has been revamped to its benefit, the hover boots giving Ratchet incredible traversal despite missing Clank, and Clank getting the best movement and level design he's ever gotten, not to mention that space is finally explorable. The game's visuals have aged by today's standards, with an over-reliance on Bloom, and Boris Salchow's soundtrack definitely doesn't match the quality of David Brachot's masterful compositions. That said, the game looks gorgeous, especially during its stunning pre-rendered cutscenes, and the magical space radio can lead to unforgettable atmospheres in space. I've written this conclusion differently compared to prior reviews, as a way to show that my cons for this game are mostly accommodated by my astronomically high pros, so I think it's safe to call this game a masterpiece. The Golden Bolt disagrees with me, having criticized A Crack in Time for not living up to its potential due to how rushed its development was and how much was cut from it and put into the Insomniac Museum. But if you ask me, the game is terrific in spite of that. Furthermore, A Crack in Time is actually the RNC game that offers the most content. Sure, it's quite short if you only do the main campaign, but 100%ing it takes longer than completing any other RNC game. Trust me, I've checked. Sure, it could have been even bigger and better had it gotten more development time and resources put into it, but as far as I'm concerned, this is still the best game Insomniac has made, even after the likes of Sunset Overdrive, Spider-Man, and Rift Apart. Those games might be more polished and complete according to their goals, but I'd say A Crack in Time's peaks go beyond their ambitions. The fact that Insomniac only had 10 months to develop it makes it all the more impressive. That said, I do acknowledge that it has its issues, so it's by no means a perfect game, nor the best game ever made. Still, Ratchet Clank Future: A Crack in Time is a flawed masterpiece that I'm giving the incredible rating of 9.5 out of 10. This is the same rating I gave to Ratchet Clank 2 Going Commando, another flawed masterpiece made in just 10 months, but I would say A Crack in Time is slightly better. Perhaps my rating for these two games is a bit inflated by my bias, so the rating is debatable, but what is undeniable is that Going Commando and A Crack in Time are my favorite video games. I'm not too bothered by their flaws. Heck, I might even embrace them. I'm glad the writers for A Crack in Time jumped the shark to craft a flawed but beautiful story that resonates with me completely. I'm glad the game designer sacrificed the combat a bit to give me the most fun movement and exploration in the series. I'm glad they made the tone more cinematic so that I would get to experience these gorgeous cutscenes and pleasant vibes in space. A Crack in Time always has something that more than makes up for its shortcomings, making it my favorite video game. Happy 15th birthday, A Crack in Time. You deserve it, and I hope I made you justice with this video. I'm Arcadon, and hopefully, you'll see me next time!